And then I will introduce Dr. Andrew Yuengert, and then we will begin. So I hope you all are doing well on this rather warm evening. So it's pretty nice, yeah. So let us pray in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, thank you for this evening. Thank you for your many blessings that you constantly send toward us. Lord, bless our conversation tonight. Open our hearts and our minds to what you have to say to us, especially as we journey ever closer to the wonderful celebration of Easter and your resurrection. Thank you for your many gifts, and thank you again for this evening. We ask this all through Christ our Lord. Amen. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So let me give a little bit of background for Dr. Yuengert. He's actually a professor of economics at Pepperdine University. Has been there for basically, what did you say, 32 years? So he's been there quite a bit. I've been blessed to go out and visit. Obviously, if you're not familiar with Pepperdine University, it is in Malibu, California. So the boonies, you know. His research crosses the boundaries between economics, ethics, and Catholic sociology. His most recent book, which I referenced also in the last two classes we have, is called Catholic Social Teaching in Practice, Exploring Practical Wisdom and the Virtues. He is currently working on Catholic social teaching from the ground up, which he says about a year, I think. So it's supposed to be coming out hopefully in about a year. And you can definitely find draft chapters on his Substacks. And it's called One Catholic Economist, and Coming to Grips with Cancer and Catholicism. And those are things. So I am blessed to know him because he is my brother-in-law. We're actually getting ready to celebrate a wedding this Saturday. So my sister-in-law is here, and another sister-in-law is actually here. She lives in town, or Newport News. But he and his wife, Liz, been married for, 38 years now, that's right. And they have 3 grown children. And some of them I will see this weekend as well. So please give Andy a wonderful, warm welcome.
Does everybody have a sheet?
Yes. No, I do not.
I'll get you one. I'll get you one.
Looks like there's a sheet in front of you. All right, I'm really glad to be here. Glad Dean Grimm invited me. I think, can you hear me all the way back there? Okay, good. I don't think I can get by without a mic. I'm good at projecting when I teach, but that might be too far to project. So I know you've been, Dean Grimm's been talking to you about Rerum Novarum and the beginning of Catholic social teaching. And I thought he was going to have me come here and talk on Rerum Novarum too. But he said, oh, you don't have to say too much about that. I've already told him a lot about Rerum Novarum. You can just talk about your book. Right? So this is the book I'm working on right here. But I do want to say a little bit about Rerum Novarum, and because it was really the beginning of modern Catholic social teaching. And so I want to say a little bit about why Rerum Novarum is often misread. Oh no. Here we go. Oh, before we get there, I do have a couple Substacks, one of which where I'm publishing draft chapters of the talk I'm giving you now. I'm up to about chapter 13. One is called One Catholic Economist. I'm just one Catholic economist. I'm not the Catholic economist. They're both on Substack. Another one's called Coming to Grips with Cancer and Catholicism. My wife, Liz, is always annoyed at the fact that the Substack address does not actually contain the title of my Substack. So it should be One Catholic Economist at Substack, but it's not that way. So if you really want to find it, just Google Substack Andrew Yuengert, and it'll just pull up all my Substacks if you're interested in seeing them. And following as I developed this book, I figured if I'm going to write it, I'm just going to have to write it a chapter at a time and post it on the Substack. So, Rerum Novarum, 1891. We often think, when people think about Catholic social teaching, we often think that it's about economics. And it was developed in the modern economy. But I'm not the only one who thinks this. Benedict XVI famously said at one point, Catholic social teaching is not primarily about economics. It's about the social order. It's about society and communities. And so it's really about the decline of society that was in the modern era. That's really what Leo XIII, who now is Leo XIV, who self-consciously named himself after Leo XIII, was really discussing throughout his pontificate the decline of the social order. And then when he got to Rerum Novarum, he was addressing economics, but he was self-consciously saying, this is something in addition to this is part of what's been going on. And so he begins by saying that the spirit of revolutionary change, so there's this spirit of revolutionary change that he's been addressing for quite a while, for several decades already, which has long been disturbing the nations of the world, should have passed beyond the sphere of politics and made its influence felt in the cognate sphere of practical economics, is not surprising. And so most of what he says about economics and most of what we draw from there about the economy is rooted in a vision of society that he finds is declining and is not protecting workers and other people within that society. And so he described here, there's no social protection for the workers. We tend to think, well, of course workers don't have any protection. That's the society we live in, the market we live in now. That wasn't the market it wasn't the society that workers lived in the 19th century. Right? The ancient workingmen's guilds were abolished in the last century. No other protective organization took their place. Public institutions and the laws set aside the ancient religion, the Catholic Church. Hence, by degrees, it has come to pass that working men have been surrendered, isolated and helpless to the hard-heartedness of employers and the greed of unchecked competition. And so all of his concerns are coming out of a larger concern about the decline of the social order and of community. So when he talks about the importance of a just wage, why does he talk about just wages being so important? Because they support families, and families support the social order. The state should preserve the freedom of families. One of the reasons he's so adamant about private property is that private property supports families, it supports all those other communities in the order and gives them some freedom from an encroaching government. So here's a nice section that I'm drawing on some of this section in what I'm going to say. He describes all of those communities between the state at the top and the individual or even the family. And the state tends to ignore all of those communities. And he has he gives an important role to those communities in society. Right, so many of his complaints when he talks about the state is that they're oppressing other societies within the social order. And of course his condemnation of socialism is because this socialism doesn't recognize anything between the individual and the state. And he said most of the important work in society is happening in those communities that are just above the family. So Rerum Novarum is about economics, but it's coming out of a framework where the concern really is the social order and the nature of it and the role of the state in it. So when you say Catholic social teaching, it's not Catholic economic teaching, it's Catholic social teaching. So why is it social? I can use the little wheel here. So what is Catholic social teaching? So as you notice, I've given out these little discussion questions here. I've found when I've given this before is that people really love to discuss. And it takes, it would take up 2/3 of my talk if I just let you talk as long as you wanted to. And you have all really interesting things to say, and the sharing is really, really great. But for this first one, I'm just going to ask people just to respond. So when you think about Catholic social teaching, this is the first visit. What do you think of when you hear the term Catholic social teaching?
Justice,
Say again?
justice,
Justice. Right? What about justice? Can you say a little more?
people being treated fairly,
Mhm.
and, I wanna say honestly, it's a hard term to use. Yes, that.
What it would mean, yeah.
Society or state, that people had the opportunity to be treated righteously.
Yeah, what a just society would look like. I actually think about that. Anything else? What else?
Acts of mercy.
Acts of mercy? Yeah, so, can you say a little bit more about that?
Just in terms of, especially the corporal acts of mercy, in terms of taking care of the poor and the hungry,
Mhm.
as part of the social teaching.
And how that should, how that might happen within a just society.
I was just gonna say poor, which we covered.
Right, the poor. Yeah. I think 15 years ago we would have talked about the poor. Pope Francis really refocused our minds on the poor. And they have to be part of this story.
The protection of the powerless in society.
The poor, the powerless. So, anything else? Anyone else? Yeah, one more.
I think all human beings have equal value before the eyes of God, and therefore should be treated equally.
So sort of equality, in some way, equal. We're all equal. So that's actually the very heart of Catholic social teaching is that human dignity of every person. And that's actually where we'll start. Okay, so Catholic social teaching is a set of principles, right, that work at every level in society, the political level, the local level, and the personal level. Catholic social teaching has something to say about everything that is a society, every from the family on up. So it's basically principles for living out the gospel in society. So it's not. So it is principles for, well, what does a just social order look like? How should the acts of mercy be brought about or exercised in society? How do we treat everybody equally? But it's also personal. Right? We tend to think of it, well, this is what the government should do, but it's also personal. How it has implications for how we live out the gospel in society. It's based on scriptures. The church did not just start thinking about these issues in 1891. Been thinking about it since the letter of James, since the early church fathers. So this is not something that was brand new. It's based on centuries of reflection. And of course, since 1891, since the advent of the modern economy and the modern state, we've been reflecting on what do these centuries of reflection have to tell us about the world we live in today. So who is it for? It's for the laity. That's what Catholic social teaching is for. It's for you and it's for me. Often in the lead up to Vatican II, Paul VI, one of his first encyclicals, after he's elected Pope, he said he was anticipating what people were thinking was going to happen in the council. And he said, people think that the laity we're not going to demand as much of the laity. And he said, on the contrary, we need to demand a lot more of the laity. And Vatican II bears that out. It really is the council of the laity. But it's not the laity becoming more active in the church, although that's good, that the laity can do more within the church. It's doing more in the world, which is where we are placed. Pope Francis said, it's great that the laity are doing things inside the church, but that's not the point. The point is the laity are out there in the world. They are the front lines of the church for sanctifying and evangelizing the world. So the document, Vatican II had an entire document on the laity. It's called Apostolicam Actuositatem, which is one of my favorite titles of any of the, it sounds like a Marvel character. And it said, the laity share in the mission of the whole people of God, in the church and in the world. So what is that mission? There's two parts to the mission of the church. The most important mission of the church is evangelization of the world. Right? And the laity are supposed to share in that. The second part of the mission is the penetrating and perfecting of the temporal order through the spirit of the gospel. Now, perfecting is kind of a scary word. Penetrating is too, but it's basically we're in the world. We're supposed to perfect it, not in the sense of making it perfect. It's not utopian. It's improving it. Perfection is the word of like making what's around us better. So why us? Why the laity? Why are we the principal subjects, people carrying this out? This is from Lumen Gentium, which is the constitution on the church from Vatican II. So the church has a constitution. Lumen Gentium from Vatican II. So basically it says, the laity, that's us, live in the ordinary circumstances of family and social life from which the very web of their existence is woven. They are called there by God that by exercising their proper function and led by the Spirit of the gospel, they may work for the sanctification of the world from within as a leaven. Or yeast, the parable of the yeast. The kingdom of God is like a measure of yeast that was worked into the bread and made the entire thing rise. Well, that's the laity. The laity go places that the clergy can't go, can't possibly go. We live our lives in the ordinary circumstances of family and social life from which the very web of their existence is woven. Bishops and clergy do not live in the ordinary circumstances of family and social life. The very web of their existence is not woven out there in the world where we are living. And so they can't evangelize and perfect parts of the world that only we can do because we're there. So this is so important that I always tell people, I wish I could make you memorize it. I have to be careful about that because I haven't memorized it myself. You didn't just see me, you just saw me read it off there. But I have given it to you here. It's on 2/3 of the way down in a box on the first page. Graham, do you have an extra copy? Again, I haven't memorized it. But it's so important that at least I want to have a copy of it. And I want to read it together with you. Because this is basically our mission. So instead of they, this is all first person, this is all us, right? Second person. So I'll get it started and just read along with me. We live in the ordinary circumstances of family and social life from which the very web of our existence is woven. We are called there by God that by exercising our proper function and led by the Spirit of the gospel, we may work for the sanctification of the world from within as a leaven. Okay, that's why it's so if the laity, if we don't do it, it's not going to get done. God is working through us in society. And he's done this before in history. Okay, so what does Catholic social teaching offer? So Catholic social teaching is supporting us in the work that we're doing in society to make the world around us better. What does it mean to be better? Well, Catholic social teaching gives us a standard, a moral standard to understand that in the light of the gospel. So the first thing we need to know is, well, if we want a society that's more humane, that's better for people and for the poor, for human beings in general. Well, what is good for human beings? What's our standard? What's the blueprint? The gospel and the church offer us a blueprint for what a good human being, a good human life is, what it means to be happy in this world. And if we have that, then we have an idea of what a good society would be, if it's good for human beings as they really are. So before we go one step further, notice that my approach to this topic is to start with human beings, to start with you and me, and what the church says about you and me. The alternative way, and the way Catholic social teaching is often taught or approached, is from what I call 30,000 feet, the level of nations, of economies, of social orders, of globalization. And as an economist, that's the way economists look at the world. They don't see, oh, I'm buying something at Walmart. They say, there's a market up there. I'm looking at the entire market. You can see a lot from 30,000 feet. Now, if you ever fly across the country, you look down and it's amazing. And satellites are learning things from 30,000 feet that we couldn't learn on the ground. But there are things you miss at 30,000 feet. You miss the fact that there are people down there living lives, and they tend to become numbers and abstractions when you're starting at 30,000 feet. So at 30,000 feet, we'll say, well, this is all about the economy, it's all about politics. Oh, by the way, there are people down there who are of great value, their families. But you're already starting out by looking at them from 30,000 feet. And so I want to start on the ground. And so as we move up, we're going to move up to 30,000 feet. But if we start on the ground, we're less likely to forget all those people on the ground and their families and their local communities when we get to 30,000 feet. And the principles of Catholic social teaching are useful at 30,000 feet, but they're also useful on the ground. So the principles of Catholic social teaching, there are more than this, but the principal ones are human dignity, common good, solidarity, subsidiarity, preferential option for the poor, participation, environmental stewardship. The ones I'm going to focus on tonight are those first five. The first four are called the four pillars of Catholic social teaching. They apply and they help us to understand every community at every level. And that's what I want to introduce you to here. These words are always a little bit strange. What's solidarity? What's subsidiarity? You can understand it from 30,000 feet, but you can understand it even better if you start in your own families, in your own local communities. And we'll talk a little bit about the preferential option for the poor, because I think it really does belong. I think there should be 5 pillars, not just 4. So one problem of starting it from 30,000 feet, and you've been through this before, and anytime there's a political cycle, it seems that Catholic social teaching is just about politics. People are just wrestling over it. And so there's a list from the bishops of 7 or 8 or 11 different things that are important in Catholic social teaching and politics. And one side will go down and tick off 5 of them and say, hey, we've got more of these than you do. Right? If you're really into politics, it's a little distorting because it's not really what Catholic social teaching is. It's not a scorecard for political parties. And if you're just a little tired of politics and it's gotten pretty nasty over the last 10, 15 years, you may just throw your hands up and say, it's not really for me. So what I find sad is that when somebody will say, I don't really have time for Catholic social teaching, to spend my time learning all that stuff, because I'm raising a family, because I'm working really hard. Because I'm busy in the nights, or in Little League, or Scouts, or in my church. I'm supporting my friends and my grown kids and their families. What's sad about this is these are things that are part of the Catholic social mission. They're just not politics. But if you're involved in them, that's where most of us are involved in the social order. That's the Catholic social mission. So somebody is saying, I can't do Catholic social teaching because I'm too busy in the communities that are around me. is missing something. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't care about politics, but you're already involved there, and Catholic social teaching can help you to understand what's going on at that level. So at the local level, I always come back to Mother Teresa. Never worry about numbers. Help one person at a time, and always start with the person nearest to you. And so we know we want to think globally, act locally. How do we connect those two? And so oftentimes when somebody says, I want to think globally and act locally, they're acting locally in a way that is really thinking about the global, and they're not really thinking too much about the local. Or they're going the other way. I just work locally, and I'm not really thinking globally. So how do you connect those two? So I want to try to make connections. So from the Gospel of Luke, he who is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much, and he who is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. And the first letter of John, for whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. So our plan is to start with a person on the ground and work our way up. So we want to be able to see society the way Catholic social teaching sees it, and to put these principles that I'll introduce to you to work at every level. So John Paul II in Centesimus Annus said, from the Christian vision of the human person, there necessarily follows a correct picture of society. And if you get the person right, and you see the person correctly, it's going to help you see everything else. So in this story, there's really no separation between your spiritual life and also your life in society. It doesn't mean you're walking out in everything you do with the cross in your hand, but it does mean that what you do on Sundays and in your prayer life and in your rosaries is not really separate. It's supposed to help all the other things that you do. The sacraments, prayer life, there's no real separation between them. So here's some time for discussion questions, and I'll give you about 5 minutes to talk about this one, and then we'll just share some answers. So there are two of them. These are discussion questions, part 2, at the bottom of the first page. It says, does Catholic social teaching seem distant to your daily life and concerns? And do you think of your everyday life as part of your social mission as a Christian? So it takes time to talk to everybody else at your table.
The first one is easy because if you belong to a religious parish like St. Jude, you're in it. You're in it to win it. But you're already doing it in so many different ways. And not just in the parish, but in so many ministries with helping, like we just did with the homeless, and helping with those ministry and their groups, and there's so much of it to go. You're surrounded by it.
Have everybody to help.
Choose my neighbor.
Yeah,
Or
there's that phone.
And if that's in your mind, then yeah, I think it's just the person to see the world.
Way of life, and that I know people if it doesn't do the same way, always go the extra mile, like you do your job and do this much, or go the extra mile and do this much, like all the time.
How does that step up and help after 30,000?
Our songs, the different sections work together. If there's anybody outside of you, problem comes up, that people would go together to help with the help with their children.
Things coming up, I have that on his list.
WRL.
This is nice. Worthwhile.
People ask her what one of their child's name is. You know what her answer is? Good. You know, when you look at it, Baker can be
picking them up and bringing them here and taking them
We lived up in Washington,
having conversations
come a couple times a year.
I'll give you another 30 seconds and collect some answers.
Find what their passion is. You ask those questions, find out what they're passionate about, and they will open it up, and it is like, it's amazing. They don't stop talking. Like, whatever it is, one year, Maggie, she's in production. She came from Los Angeles, and she's in production and stuff, and she started talking. You just find out what their passion is, sorry, I work in the fourth colony, so I have a lot of, I don't know how to say this.
Okay, let's come back.
Experimental. And it's hard to work with them. One person at a time.
So what were some of the
Everybody knows
reactions,
everybody knows
observations about
everybody.
where Catholic social teaching fits into your life, and how you experience it? Yes?
So, whether in the context of, say, a government job, or whether within the context of government job more formally, or just kind of in other workplaces, right, where you're around people of different faiths, I think that people act as a good person, but try to view that as a matter of procedure or legislation, rather than as a virtue ethics calculation from Catholic social teachings, right?
Right, so, if you're a layperson, and the very web of your existence is in the middle of a government agency or a large corporation or a sub restaurant, you're basically saying, I can't just march right in and say, hey, here's what Catholic social teaching says. But your job as Levin, our challenge as Levin, is to say, how do I be who I am, and how do I bring the gospel in here in ways that are effective? And effective often just means, how do I make this place better? How do I make it better? And of course, what does better mean? Right?
I was just gonna say, but maybe not explicit, like, we internally may not be making that connection with Catholic social teaching, or externally be saying, I am acting this way because of Catholic social teaching, but we do it because of Paul.
Yes.
Yeah, I think building on that point, we've talked here, going through life as a Catholic and a Christian, and who can I be neighbor to? you do all that, the distance is, oh, I didn't realize that was called Catholic social teaching. You know, there's the disconnect of the phrase and the structure of it versus what you do in your everyday life.
You know, what you do when you make bread is you think, right? I mean, animals can't make bread. Only human beings can make bread, right?
Mhm.
So they said, well, let me mix wheat with yeast, and they produce something. And so that's what our Catholic work of human hands. So what we do is we think about how we can be kind, good, and create better things.
So, yeah, if you are actually living in the world and being kind, treating people like they have dignity, you might think, oh, everybody does that. And there are people who do that. We know lots of people who we really respect and admire. But people will also notice you and they'll wonder what's going on. Before I got to the West Coast, I worked at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York for 4 years. And I wasn't, I didn't have a cross out on my desk. I wasn't, going around praying all the time. After about 6 months, somebody came up and said, I hear that you're a Catholic. I did not know. I never said I was a Catholic. They just thought that there was something different. To give God the credit for that, but people notice. People notice the other way too. Right? They say, oh yeah, you're a Catholic. That's what Catholics do. Right? So you can spoil the bread, or you can actually help it to rise. Right? Any other thoughts? Mary?
We decided that most of us are practicing Catholic social teaching without knowing that that's what we're doing. And so the first answer is, no, it's not, distant. Yes, it's distant from my daily life. And then you look at it a little more closely and say, no, it is my life.
If you're well-formed, if you're Catholic living the faith. Thomas à Kempis in the Imitation of Christ, very early on, he says, I would rather actually feel remorse, feel repentance, than know the definition of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's two steps. One is to find out what is the Catholic social teaching, but number two, to implement it today is extremely hard, because it's less of a Christian society, less of a Christian culture today. It's just so apparent in many ways. In fact, actually, if you know who Cardinal Raymond Burke is, he just got a video yesterday or today talking about this, getting back to the basics. Many priests. There's also Fathers of Mercy out of Kentucky, who was a good priest, who was going back to the basics of Orthodoxy, because that's been all confused with a lot of things for a lot of reasons.
So I'm going to continue on, but I'll ask you, the next time we have a discussion, I'll go with you first. Okay, so I want to start with these Catholic social principles from the ground up. Of course, we start with a way of seeing. So Catholics see the world differently. We should see the world differently. It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. And David Thoreau, who was not a Catholic, but that's my saying. So what do you see here? You see Jesus healing somewhere. Not everyone who saw this saw Jesus healing someone. They weren't looking for that. You tend to think, oh, if only I could go back and see Jesus, then I would believe. Well, a bunch of people who saw Jesus did not believe. No, this is not Jesus healing. There's something else going on here, right? Because they weren't seeing. And so hopefully Catholic social teaching can help us to see. And we start by seeing the human person, right? Catholics should see the world differently. Instead of individuals bopping around in the world, we should see persons. We'll talk about what that means. Instead of consumption, we should see virtues. And instead of common interests, we should see common good. And instead of power, we should be seeing and respecting authority. Next discussion. So we start with the human person. Right? So Gaudium et Spes from the Second Vatican Council. The beginning, the subject, and the goal of all social institutions is and must be the human person. So what is the human person like? What should we see? Unfortunately, there are many false visions of the human person, so we have to talk a lot about what the human person is not. And if you think about all these different ways of seeing the human person that come to us from society, they're very much, it's very easy for us to see human people like that, human persons like that as well. This is very interesting sculpture. It looks like some human being who's freeing himself from a rock. It's like he's stuck in a rock and he's chipping his. That's not what this is. This is a rock deciding it wants to be a human being. It's a rock making a human being out of itself. So what is the vision of the person here? The person is individual, autonomous. I am my own creator. I create value, I create my being, my identity. I am the measure of truth, and I'm not connected to others. He didn't come anywhere. He didn't come from anywhere except from his own will.
But that's exactly the problem today, mindset.
So, what other things are the person not? So actually, anytime you hear, you can be anything you want to be, just dream big and you can do it. Well, there's some truth to that. People need to be able to be bold in some ways, but that's not often what people mean by it. It means you can be absolutely whatever you want to be. And you're your own creator. We are not just the product of outside forces, genetics, power, discrimination. We have free will. We're not just fully determined by the environment that we live in. That's a very common way of seeing human beings. Right? There's no free will. We're just always a product of, this is not the Catholic. We're not just animals. We are animals, but we're human animals. That's all the difference. So if we say, well, we're just animals and we just act in the same way and have the drives as other animals, that's the false view of a human being. We're animals who think, made in the image of God. We're not just pure individualists, greedy. What's in it for me?
But that's a lot of the mindset today.
So we often, you see it in movies, basically, basically everybody is basically in it for themselves. And there's nobody who's really in it for anything else. We reveal by the end of the movie that they're just in it for themselves. And that's what everybody's doing. So you can't trust anybody. And we're not just a set of multiple identities. This is back to sort of self-creation, just creating the identity, choosing the identities we want: age, gender, religion, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and so on. These are all things that the person is not, and you see them all over the place. And you may see them in your own way of thinking about the world, because we live in the world; they affect us as well. So what's so great about the person? So our human dignity is rooted in the fact that we are created by God, valued for our own selves. Vatican II says the human person is the only creature God created for its own sake. Valued for self. God created us, and at the very end, when he created man, he looked down and said, "It's very good." And he was looking at his whole creation, but just like everything else, it's good. So he created us for himself to be in communion with him. He created a garden, put us to work in it, to meet our needs, and then he saved us through Christ. There's always more. He saved us through Christ, in whom we move and live and have our being. So this is God, and this is you. And that's not just you, it's every person in the world.
But is that the right orientation? God is down there.
Let's save it for discussion.
Because some people actually think they're on God. So.
That's true, that's a self-created.
Yeah.
So we're made in the image of God. And when we think about creation, God, every time he creates something, he says, let this exist. Right? Let there be. And so he brings things into existence, and then he says, it's good. And so he created this unbelievable creation. It's beautiful, it exists, and it's good. And not only that, he placed creatures in it who could see that creation the way he saw it. Not in every way, because we're not infinite, but we can see that things exist, and we can say that they're good. Right? So we've been placed in this world as sort of God's image within this world. We have been put to work in creation. We were in the garden. Adam was put to work, tending the garden, to meet his own needs and to tend the garden. And we were made to love God, to respond to that love that he gives to us in creation, and to spread that love to others. There's a natural overflow. We love God. We love the other persons that he has made. So if this is God and this is you, this is going to be you, and this is supposed to be me. As I have done, you're supposed to do as well. So we accept that love for God, and we return it to him, but we also return it in his name to others around us. Right? That's the social part of social teaching. So the dignity of the human person is that first principle of Catholic social teaching, before all the others. So each of us is valued for his own sake, never as a means, but as an end. Right? So we don't use another person as an instrument to something that we want, but we also treat them as someone who is a person of great dignity on themselves. So everyone should be a participant in some way, and it's important that everyone should be what John Paul II called an agent of their own development, right? Exercising that initiative, that image of God in them. So when we help people, we want to enable them to achieve and not just give them things, although sometimes that's what you have to do. Right? But we're, for people of great dignity, we're looking for them. So there's bad news here. The bad news is sin. We are not just agents of our own development, we're agents of our own misery. These are the 7 capital sins. Pretty much covered everything. It's a part of our sinful lives. Pride is at the heart of it all, wanting to be God and not to accept his love and his the constraints of his love and his creation on us. Concupiscence, consumerism, and selfishness. And so the bad news, and it's important whenever you're thinking about Catholic social teaching or the social order, to recognize that we are imperfect. We're not just imperfect, we're also sinful. Benedict XVI said, ignorance of the fact that man has a wounded nature inclined to evil gives rise to serious errors in the areas of education, politics, social action, and morals. Okay, so let's take another break for discussion before we jump into the family and other communities. So this is part 3. This is on the second page, at the top of it. Are you ever tempted to think about yourself as a self-creator, as autonomous and not really free? Do you think of yourself as loved by God, created especially by him for your own sake? And 3 reverses this. Do you think of other people as loved by God, created especially by him for their own sakes? I'll take 5 minutes and talk it over.
I think our society needs us to balance two words. She's right, especially when you want that's bad and sinful. But we're led to think that instead of seeing ourselves as
Number one, and actually I was thinking about that recently. How did I get to be the person I am today? And look at that way, I don't know. Like done walk and also stupidity thinking I can do this, I can do this, and people in my house, just being there and supportive. It's so different. I was growing up with Talking the right talk and things like that.
I wrote down, I did this in quotations with no result, because your phrase, I did this is wrong perspective. When you look back and see, here's where God was,
I figured there must have been something else operating that got me to this point. In so many different areas, there's different natures in your life in different generations, like you say, try to adapt to different things. There's a lot of humility in order to break all that them sins. You really have to ask for God's grace in a lot of things. I think God purposely put certain things in your life and certain traumas and different things for you to have that empathy and compassion for people that you believe in. So if you have a struggle or something that you're going through until you've gone through it yourself, it's hard for you. It's easier for you to be able to talk to somebody else about it if you've gone through it. Sickness, cancer, you'll grasp that empathy. You'll have it, and it's easier to be able to work with somebody. God's grace, I think, you gotta praise it. Some of this stuff you gotta praise for. This is not free. You're just not gonna do
That's kind of,
see?
you have to really try
Like I just came here just now, and right by where the PetSmart is, and Wendy's, by Monticello, where PetSmart is, and Wendy's got that same, smoking a cigarette, and he's loaded with bottles of drinks and stuff, and he's sitting there, looking for money. And I see the same person over and over, and then I'm thinking, in my head I'm sitting there, probably probably selecting something. In my head I'm thinking all this stuff, and as I'm driving away and I didn't give him anything, I start saying, who am I to get I start, this stuff is in my head.
In the garden, God created everything good. He created everything good. It's great that people create free will. We now
Right, okay, that's what we're doing.
have good and evil. And God wants us to freely good. And I think Christ gives us the choose, even though we got things sometimes evil. God on the cross gave us the power through the Spirit to choose the good.
Probably means we need to move on. So let's come back to here. And any quick thoughts on this? Anything at this table? I cut you off the last time. Anything you want to share? Anyone else? Yeah.
I thought about that we in our society, in the modern world, are led to think this. We're led to think that we're great and we've done things and we've, gained wealth and power and beauty and whatever. And society tells us that because
And it's pretty astounding what we have done.
Because it's not so Catholic social teaching or teaching.
Yeah, so you understand why someone might be tempted to say, well, you know, we're curing cancer, we're doing this, we're going to the moon, what can't we do? Right? And but it's tempting to say, in the same way that there's so much material wealth in the world, it's tempting to say, hey, we've got this, you don't have to worry about it. We just build more silos for our wealth, and we'll just be fine, we don't need that. It's all tempting because, in some way, because we have this image of God in us that is pretty astounding when we discover things and when we develop things. But it's not perfect and it can lead us astray in weird ways if we don't understand who we really are and what all that is really for.
Number two, if you're my age, you remember what the Baltimore Catechism told you, right? So, I can't imagine thinking about him creating me for my own sake. There's a purpose.
Right, well, that purpose is to be with Him forever and eternity. I find the questions 2 and 3, oftentimes I find one person will say, yeah, I can think of myself as loved by God, but 3 is a little harder.
Yeah.
Or I can find it's really easy to see 3 is pretty easy for me,
Yeah.
but 2 is kind of hard
Yeah.
to see that I myself am loved by God.
Balance between the two.
So let's move on. So the person, just to summarize, made in the image of God, great dignity, sin distorts, plus what's missing from this picture? Person is inherently social and made for friendship with others and with God. And the human person as a spiritual being is defined through interpersonal relations. Benedict XVI. The person is inherently social, it's not this. Right? The person is more like this. You're embedded in societies already, even when you're born, you're embedded in a bunch of societies.
Did Pope Benedict XVI take that from John Paul's theology of the body, that we are defined also by how other people perceive us as identity?
It's related to that. Yeah. So God Himself, in whose image we're made, is inherently social. Right? He's revealed to us that He's not just a unitary being, He's 3 persons. Right? One God, 3 persons, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. So even in the life of God, there's this community. So the person is social. How do we know the person's social? If you get to know somebody, what do you get to know about them? So okay, I know your name. And then if you start asking questions to get to know them, what do you ask? Where do you live? Where's your family? Do you have any kids? Who's your father? Who's your mother? Who do you root for? Where do you work? All the questions we ask to get to know somebody are questions about relations, social relations. And the more you want to know someone, the more you ask about. Because to know someone is to know their social relations as well, not just who they are. You can't know just who they are. You want to know who they know and who they're related to. Do we have the same friends? Where did you work? Oh, I worked there too. And we're always looking for those connections. So we're inherently social. We're not inherently individuals. So why are we social? Right? So an important question in Catholic social teaching is, why do you need community? This is one of those questions that, well, of course, we all need community. Why do we have to talk about why we need community? But there's something useful in detailing this. So we need communities for 2 reasons. One, because of our needs, our practical needs. And that's a very practical need for society. And also because of our dignity, our social nature needs society. So if you look at what this person needs here, this person needs a community for very practical needs. Food, shelter, clothing, education. can't get them by themselves, right? So in community, you get goods that you can't produce all by yourself. You need to produce them with other people. Now, this often leads people to think in very cynical ways, oh, you're just in a community because you just need the things the community is giving you. That's not the only reason we need community. We need community because we are inherently social. We need an outlet for the love of God that's been poured in our heart. And if it just stays there, it decays. It overflows into our love for others. The same way that God's love overflows into our life. So not only do we need to work with other people to produce those very practical things we need, work, education for our children, things like that, we want to do it together. People want to produce those things together. And it's not just the things, it's producing them together. So when you talk about all those various things that in a community that you get are very practical, and things that you individually get because you're in a community, we call those common goods. That's a plural. But then there's the common good. The common good of a community is the good of that community that's indivisible. It's something that can't be split up. Right? I can't take it away from the community. It's something that the community itself is experiencing, and everyone in that community is getting the benefit of it. And that includes the friendship and the love and the communion in that community. That's something that is common to everyone in that community. It's not divisible. You can't carry it away. It's that experience and that desire to do things together. So it becomes not a I, but it becomes a we. It's something that we are doing together. I'll give you the example in the family. So the family is the primary human community, natural community. Husband and wife have this unity, but notice that unity does not overwhelm their personality. That personality is preserved. And that unity is the common good in that marriage. In fact, in Catholic teaching, what you commit to as husband and wife is that marriage bond. It's not, oh, I'm committing to your well-being and my well-being, that's all important. You're committing to the marriage bond. And that's not something that's divisible. If a marriage fails, each spouse doesn't take half of it with them. Right? It's the common good. And it only exists in their unity and in their work together. So there are practical reasons why a couple will get married. Then there's the common good. Right? And this is the quintessential social good and the expression of our social nature. Is goods that, so if a spouse is, if I'm talking to my wife, I'll never say, well, you know, in my marriage we're doing this and this and this. That would be very awkward. Right? I've never heard anybody say that, right? Well, you might hear it say it in some other situations, but I've never said it to my wife. Oh, you know, in my marriage, blah, blah, blah. It's our marriage. It can't be anything except our marriage. So what about the family more in general? Right? The common goods of the family are the unity, particularly in the husband and wife, but also the unity in the family. The children themselves are a common good. Marriage, and you can't split them up. Take half of a child if the marriage fails. There are common goods. There are practical things, physical, emotional needs of the children, and the mother and the father in a marriage. But notice, we're talking about common good here. We haven't even talked about the common good of the United States or anything. A family has a common good. In fact, there's not just one common good. There are many common goods within society. And they're an indicator that something very important is going on in our social nature. There's an expression of our dignity and our vocation in those social communities that have common goods. So in the family, so again, we'll talk about the social principles when we get to the state and the government, but the family itself has a common good. Each person in the family is a person of great dignity. In fact, you hope that children and others will learn of their great dignity and value within a family. One of the things we always said about cousins in our family was that cousins are people who have to like you no matter what. So those are two of the principles there: human dignity, common good. There are other principles also. You can see them at work in the family. In fact, it's easier to see them in the family than it is at the level of Washington, D.C. And so I want to talk a little bit about solidarity, subsidiarity, and option for the poor. So solidarity is basically a commitment to the common good of whatever community you're part of. And of course, you're part of very many different communities, and you'll be committed to those various common goods. So it's out of love for one's own good and that of others that people come together in stable groups with the purpose of attaining a common good. That's from the compendium of the social doctrine of the church. So how does that show up? I have a little thing of family night up here. Let's say it's a Wednesday night and your daughter gets a call and it's, hey, let's go do something tomorrow night, Thursday night. And you hear your daughter say, I'm sorry, Thursday nights are family game night. And I was just sitting beside her and I said, solidarity. It was like, wow, that's a love for what the family is doing, that unity of the family. She may have wanted to go out on Thursday night. She may have wanted an excuse, but I don't know. But it was also like, this is something we do together, and it's an important part of our life together. That's solidarity. Subsidiarity. Doesn't quite work in the family, but there's a beautiful statement on subsidiarity in the Catechism. It says, God has not willed to reserve to himself all exercise of power. He entrusts to every creature the functions it is capable of performing according to the capacities of its own nature. This mode of governance ought to be followed in social life. In other words, God is all powerful, but he doesn't just do everything for us. He wants us to do it, even though we might not do it as well as he would. So when I think of subsidiarity in a family, you always want your children to start to learn to do things. You want help with the chores, of course, but you know that they're not going to do the chores as well as you do. And if you're trying to teach them to paint a wall, if you're not going to just let them paint the wall and make mistakes, and you help them out a little bit, you'll just say, oh, forget it, I'll do it myself to make sure it's done well. Subsidiarity is to realize that it's not just about the wall, it's about the people who are growing as human beings, exercising their responsibility and learning to do things on their own, and to contribute to what's going on in the family on their own. Yeah.
Do you think today families are healthy as they were, let's say, 50 years ago?
That's too big a question, we'll save it for discussion. Okay, so subsidiarity, you can see it in the family, where it's not about efficiency. It's not about, could I do it? I do it. I'll just do it myself because I can do it better. There's something important going on when your children are learning to do things and perhaps doing things together for the rest of the family, like planning a party or trying to help with Mother's Day, whatever it happens to be. And then the option for the poor. This is from the compendium. In the family, special attention must be devoted to the children, especially the smaller the child, and the more it's in need of everything when it's sick, suffering, or handicapped. In any family, sometimes there's one child who is just really handicapped, really needs a lot of help throughout their lives. In every family, there's one child. Every child at some point is one of these poor children. And in a family, you learn that the people who are suffering at a particular time need more attention, need more support. And so the preferential option for the poor is important at society level, but you learn it. You learn it in families, where people say, oh yeah, the people who are suffering right now need the most support now. They need our support. But Francis, when he talked about the marginalized and the poor, one of the things he said was, sometimes the marginalized and the poor are in your own family. Right? They aren't necessarily those who are in dire poverty. There's a different kind of poverty, even in your own family. So the preferential option for the poor is also something that you can recognize in a family as well. It's just part of it. Okay, so discussion question. So I basically introduced you to the 4 pillars of Catholic social teaching: human dignity, common good, solidarity, subsidiarity, and preferential option for the poor, in the context of the family, hoping that they'll make some sense there, but they might not make sense at a more abstract level. So this discussion question says that these principles can help us to see the family differently. Are there other important principles to healthy family life that are also important? The answer is yes. I'm just wondering what those principles are.
Yeah, I would say, like, particularly fathers should be leading the family in prayer, because that carries over. Actually,
Why don't you talk to your group about it?
oh, I'm sorry.
No, no, no.
Recognize each other's strengths, like, my sister said my husband doesn't cooking, and we help each other, like, really was that's not one of their travels, or that's not one of their
Back a few years ago, I had a cousin who was a little bit older than my son. Got married, started a family, and a living out there. And she'd say things, and it meant nothing to me because I wasn't even thinking about that. And one day she said, you don't put every child with the same thing equally. You don't treat them equally, because they need different things. Give them what they need. Some are just stuck with you.
Maybe a temper for a very short term. I never looked at it.
I can remember looking at it, giving extra in the family that and you're not being judgmental. The way people are compensated differentially depending on their chosen profession. And some professions just command more money, whether they deserve it or not, and others a lot less money, and they deserve more, but kind of level the playing field.
Yeah, you're meeting the needs, and there's needs where it can be dynamic.
I look at the beggar, and you look at the beggar, and you see somebody, and how do you look at the beggar? You say, that good for nothing person, didn't get a job or do something like that. Maybe he's incapable of getting a job. And sometimes, you look at the beggar, and you say, and he's a happy person being a beggar. Saying, I'm a good beggar, and people come up and give him money and stuff like that. And then what he does, a good beggar, you don't know his surroundings or his connection. He may go home and have a son or a daughter or someone, eat with the proceeds he gets from the beggar. And so, is he good beggar? He doesn't strive to be anything better than what he is. But we say, good for nothing person, get a job, get money.
The parable of the talents, there's a line in there, something according to the needs. The parables weren't given, the talents weren't given, one got five, one got two, one got one. Why? And receiving what they needed, or what they felt the capacity was, if he were to do what they could. But even in that parable, it was necessarily based on needs, not everybody needs.
But the one that
I'm sorry, the time is getting away from us, and I do want to respect your time, but so to continue here, actually, I'm going to sort of, I want to say a little bit about politics at the end, but I want to show you where this is going. I had one interesting comment up here, is that one of the sort of principles of a healthy family life is that everybody didn't have to do the exact same thing. That it's actually the principle of unity can sometimes be that people are doing different things within a family. And that we're not all identical. That's part of the realization of our dignity and also our contributions to the common good. We don't all have to be the same. Okay, so we're going to see the same pattern. So the individual needs the family or the communities because of its needs, very practical, and also because of its dignity. We're made to do things together, to seek our needs with others. Well, the family is also not sufficient unto itself. It's not just its own life unto itself. If it was, we'd call it a clan. Although there's some people, I actually have had some people from some countries who say, don't say clan's a bad thing, clan's a good thing. I don't mean what they mean. We can see it. A clan that's just fully focused in on itself, it's going to be missing something. It's not going to be involved. And also, it's going to have needs it's not going to meet, and it's going to have its vocation that it's not going to fulfill. Right? The family is inherently social. Why is the family not sufficient? Well, because we need others to meet our practical needs, education for our children. Even homeschooling families need other communities to help them out with things they can't do on their own in homeschooling. Most of us need to work, and I can't. I'm just not working all by myself. Most of us do that in community. I find work with others who are doing work. Right, so the family is inherently social because of its needs, and also because it's part of a healthy family, any healthy community, that it's oriented not just towards its own common good, but also to the community around it. Families want to do things, it's good for us to do things with others, right? Other individuals and other families and other communities. And so we have a whole network of the communities that surround the family, churches, extended families, clubs, community groups, nonprofits, for-profit businesses, all of which can have their own common good, their own identity, their own source of communion. Right? They can develop very deep friendships working with other people in a common project. This church has a common good. Even businesses ought to have a common good. So communities provide those practical needs and an outlet for their love and the common goods. Right? So you want your children to be involved in other communities that have common goods to which they can commit themselves in solidarity. And those communities themselves will respect the families and not just replace those families unless the families are in real trouble. Right? So there's a whole network. John Paul II calls it a network of solidarity throughout society, family, and then all of the communities that support the family and the family supports. And so, obviously, principles apply at these levels in these communities as well. Not in the same way that they apply in the family. Right? The church is not. Actually, family is the closest thing you might have to something like the church would be the closest thing to something you might think of as like a family. It's also one of the sort of necessary societies. But clubs, schools, businesses, right? When they're going really well, we say, oh, it's like a family. I think that's really reflecting these principles of Catholic social teaching and healthy societies, healthy orders. Now, of course, communities are not sufficient unto themselves. Right? Can't run. There are things that the Girl Scouts can't do on their own, and a school can't do on its own. You need something more. Right? That's where government comes in. So here's where we get to that 30,000 feet. So we're at the government. Right? So And here's where we often hear about the common good. In politics, there's the common good. And there is a common good for a country, a nation. A little more abstract, a little harder to see when you have 350 million people in one country. What's our common good? It's worth asking. Partly, though, that common good is realized in all those subsidiary, all those communities between the state and the individual. Because all of them are created and driven by people of great dignity, and they partake in the dignity of the people who are actually creating them and meeting their needs in them. So the common good in the Catechism and in Gaudium is defined as the sum of those conditions of social life which allow social groups and their individual members relatively thorough and ready access to their own fulfillment. This is from Vatican II. It is defined at the level of a community, of the nation. And it seems much more abstract, actually, the higher you get. It's a sum of conditions. It's not some individual good. Although what's crucial about it is these conditions allow social groups and their individual members. Right? The common good of a nation involves all those social groups and that they're flourishing as well. It's not just the nation and the individuals. So one of the big differences between, one of the big challenges of the modern state is that the modern state, when you're looking at it from the point of view of the modern state, there's actually a famous book called Seeing Like a State. And when you look at the world from the 30,000 feet from Washington, D.C., it's tempting to see the world like this. I've got a bunch of individuals, that's what I'm collecting data on. And I want to know what all their individual outcomes are. And there's me up here, or us up here at the government level. And we miss, if this is what the state sees, and you might say, well, how could the state possibly see this? The state often misses what's in between the individual and its own prerogatives, its own goals. And this is what Catholic social teaching sees. Right? In between the individuals, their families, and the state are a whole network of communities that are just humming with communion, friendship, and practical action. So the common good in Catholic social teaching involves all these communities as well. And one of the stories of that Leo XIII was writing about in the 1800s and in Rerum Novarum was the state seeing itself in competition with all of these communities and trying to eliminate them or suppress them, including the church and things like unions, which are communities among workers. And of course, the church is part of this story too, but that's a whole different lecture. So the common good is the sum of those conditions of social life which allow social groups and their individual members access to their flourishing. And so it involves not just one common good up here, that common good includes all the common goods and the flourishing of all those communities, which is also part of human flourishing and dignity. So you think of social justice, there are lots of definitions of it. Social justice is not defined in Catholic social teaching. It's very frustrating, I can't find a single definition of it. One definition is the flourishing of individuals in their communities and that order within society. Another definition is much more individualistic. It's like, not to say that there's anything particularly terrible about it, but it's like focusing on that justice at that individual level, that access. Subsidiary is respect and support for all those communities between the state and the individual. And solidarity is the love for the common good within each community and then for the state's common good. Those are not necessarily in conflict. Although this vision requires tolerance for a much more pluralistic society. Because one of the reasons the state might have a problem, even with a family, is that they're not doing things the way the state wants them to do them. Right? They may have a different way of thinking about what it means to raise their children well. So the state will say, no, you're not doing it right. You know, you're actually raising those children on behalf of the state. That's not an outrageous thing to think that the state is doing. Right? That we're basically social service providers for the state. That's a violation of subsidiarity, right? And also the common goods of all these communities that are within this society. And so one of the drivers of Catholic social teaching over the last 100 years has been the state expanding and expanding and taking over and pushing out some of the functions of all these intermediary communities. In fact, John Paul II ascribed the fall of Soviet communism to the fact that it erased all of these communities between the individual and the state. And he said, you don't learn solidarity by having solidarity to the state. You learn it in your families, in your local communities. And if they're not there, you don't learn it. And the society will collapse because you need solidarity to have a society that persists. So let me just say a little bit about politics. Because you can't talk about Catholic social teaching without talking about politics. So, let me just say a couple things. This is a quote from C.S. Lewis, who is not a Catholic, but it's a really great quote, so I always use it. This is from Mere Christianity. Mere Christianity has a whole chapter on Christian social morality. And he starts out by saying, most of us are not really approaching the subject, Christian social morality, in order to find out what Christianity says. We are approaching it in the hope of finding support from Christianity for the views of our own party. We're looking for an ally when we are offered either a master or a judge. I'm just the same. I like the fact that he ended that way. Like, oh, you're doing this. He said, I'm just the same. I tend to want the church to be on my side, so I can use it as a club against other people. So, see, the church says you should do this, right? And so there's this temptation at the beginning to say, because we care about politics, and it's really easy to say, well, I hope to listen to the things they say when the church is on your side, and to sort of ignore it when it's not. I have been doing research on economics and theology and Catholic social thought since 1994. In that time, I have heard people say, if you're a Christian, you have to be a socialist. I've heard people say, if you're a Christian, you have to be in favor of free markets. Neither of them are right. Doesn't mean that I tend to be in favor of free markets, but not because I'm a Christian. There's nothing in that says you have to have this. It logically follows from being a Christian. There is no Christian position on economics. I was hired to write an article on Catholic social teaching and economics about a decade ago for a volume on different Christian religions, and the editor wanted me to call it Roman Catholic economics. And it's still called Roman Catholic economics. But I start out that article by saying there is no such thing as Roman Catholic economics. There are Catholics who are doing economics, all of whom hopefully are being challenged by Catholic social teaching. So this is the role of the laity, being informed, having our consciences formed by Catholic social teaching. We're responsible for politics. We're guided by the bishops, by the graces we get in the life of the church, and by Catholic social teaching. The Catholic social teaching is not a program. It's not a political program. They're principles. John Paul II called it an indispensable and ideal orientation. So in Catholic social teaching, when we think about making decisions, there's this three-part: look, judge, and act. And you want to look and see, well, what's happening? What's going on here? And economics matters there, research matters there, what's happening? And then we need to judge, right? What's at stake here? And then you act. Right? Principles are enough for judging, but they're not enough for looking. They're not enough for acting. They're not enough to tell you what's going on in a particular economy with a particular program or a particular piece of legislation. To apply principles to action, you need to evaluate context. What are the circumstances? What helps us to take care of, to understand context? The virtue of practical wisdom, of prudence. You know the principles, we try to understand the context. But this, again, practical wisdom is the virtue of the laity. It's not the virtue of the bishops. It's the virtue of the laity. And when people apply practical wisdom to people of goodwill, might apply it in very different ways. Because they may read the context differently. One of them, or both of them, may be wrong about how they're reading the context. One may be right in some ways and wrong in some other ways. But people of goodwill can disagree about how the principles should be applied. So we can all be in favor of environmental stewardship. We can put on this world not just as dominate, not just to extract things from it and to use it, but we're supposed to take care of it. That doesn't necessarily mean that we all agree that the Paris Climate Accords were the right way to embody that. We all know we should welcome the stranger. That doesn't mean that we all agree on greater immigration all the time. We all agree that workers should be able to support themselves by the work of their hands, by labor. That doesn't mean we all agree on a minimum wage. Right? To get from there to here, you need to understand the context, the research, and people may disagree on that. Right? And disagreeing on it does not mean they don't care about the principle. Right? One of the worst forms of argument is, well, if you don't believe in a minimum wage, you just don't care about just wages. Right? Or if you don't support the Paris Climate Accord, you don't care about the environment. You're getting it backward. You can care about the environment and not agree on a particular policy. So what happens when a pope makes a statement? And when popes teach principles, it's natural that they will talk about applications, because you teach principles through applications. But the principles have the greatest authority in what the popes teach. Their applications do not have the same authority as the principles. But there's a danger there. You can just say, well, I don't agree with their political application, so I don't have to worry. So we throw out the application and we throw out the principles. So the popes, I don't believe, they don't understand the economy, or they don't understand this or that. And so all of a sudden, we're not listening to the principles that are supposed to challenge us and form our consciences. We're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So don't reject the principles along with the application. What does that mean? This is very personal, right? Because I disagree with what bishops say in certain areas. If you reject an application, you say this is not going to be workable, it's not going to work, it's going to be counterproductive, whatever it is, you have an obligation to say what is the best way to try to promote these principles. You can't just abandon it. You've got to let it challenge you. Let it challenge your conscience. Right? If the minimum wage isn't the right way, okay, what else? Don't just dispose of it just because the bishops care about the principles, and they want you to care about them too. They may not know the exact thing to do, but the laity are put into the world to be creative, relying on God. Good economists, good lawyers, good workers, good analysts. Don't just give it up because you don't agree with what the Pope said or what your bishop said. In fact, what we need is an examination of conscience for Catholic social teaching. Benedict XVI, when he was Cardinal Ratzinger, he wrote a beautiful letter to theologians called The Vocation of the Theologian. And in that, he was very sympathetic. He was writing to theologians who disagreed with really important Catholic moral doctrines. He was very sympathetic to them. He said, in your mind, in your reason, you don't see why this is so important. But you're a Catholic, and so you're supposed to obey. And so he noted that tension, between, it doesn't make sense to me, but this is the teaching of the church for 1900 years, or the Pope or the bishops at this particular time. So he's very sympathetic to that. But he didn't excuse people from that tension. But he also suggested an examination of conscience for people who disagree with their bishops in the church. Now, he wrote it for a situation where the church's teaching was very clear and very enduring. So I've written an examination of conscience for something that's not quite as enduring. You can disagree with the Pope on a particular proposal or your bishop, but you need to examine your conscience on it. And so here's the examination of conscience I suggest, and I have it written out for you. We're not going to read it together because this is not, there's not a priest here confessions after this. But I think the important thing about Catholic social thought, and the best thing about it, is when it challenges everybody who's a Catholic, no matter where they are in politics on the spectrum. Challenge them. They should all be challenged. Right? So several years ago, Paul Ryan, who was the representative from Wisconsin, a very conservative guy, he said, I really rely on Catholic social teaching. And there were people on the left who said, he can't do that. He can't do that. That's exactly what we want to happen. It doesn't mean that he's going to have the same opinions, but Catholic social thought, if it's going to affect the laity and affect the world, it has to affect everybody. It's good that everybody would feel challenged by it, or would take on that challenge. So here it is. Am I taking seriously enough the moral stakes which motivated my bishop to act? Are my criticisms motivated by a desire to justify myself, my worldview, and to excuse myself from sacrifice and discomfort? Even if my criticisms are legitimate, am I sufficiently committed to addressing the problem? Or am I content to excuse myself from action by pointing out the practical shortcomings in the episcopal proposal? So there are lots of discussion these days about how to actually disagree charitably. There's nothing worse than when Catholics go after each other the way people go out after each other outside of the church. Right? With, despising each other and attacking each other viciously, dismissing each other. We're all brothers and sisters in Christ. There's something wrong if we can't get past that. So sometimes you have to practice it within those who share this bond in Christ. So he's the Holy Father, he's your bishop. You need to respect him and pray for him. I often had a lot of disagreements with Pope Francis, and I specifically, every time I talked about him, I talked about the Holy Father, Pope Francis. I didn't want to forget that, because he's the Holy Father. He was the Holy Father. And pray for him. In fact, I started praying for Pope Francis like I'd never prayed for popes before. I said, why didn't I pray for Benedict this way? Why didn't I pray for John Paul II? I should be praying for the Pope. Okay? And with other people you disagree with inside the church, emphasize the positive and the agreement. Don't use straw man arguments that the other side would not say, that's not my argument. Don't criticize when you're upset, which may mean you're just not criticizing a lot. Because if you're just upset a lot. Again, I'm not making fun of anybody. I'm upset. It's not a good time to criticize people. And don't ever do it on social media. It's just bad for you. And would you speak this way to someone that you love? So here, we don't have time for discussion questions, but you can take these home. Am I charitable toward those who disagree with me about politics? Do I try to find someone I agree with? Do I try to find something I agree with even when I disagree? And do I treat their arguments fairly, in the same way that I would treat my own arguments? We're a lot easier on our own arguments than we are on other people's arguments. Nice thing about being a Catholic is that the Catholic Church is not altogether on anybody's side. And this is a quote from Treebeard from Lord of the Rings. I love it when he says, I'm not altogether, the hobbits are saying, well, are you on somebody's side in this, the war between the different sides? He says, I'm not altogether on anybody's side, because nobody is altogether on my side. That's the church that we belong to. So finally, charity in all things, even in politics. No exceptions. And talk to God. This is not something that you can just do in your mind. If you're worried about something, if you're upset about something, and say, maybe I should be thinking more about this, or maybe I should support this, pray about it, talk to God. We have this great resource. Yeah.
A question from you're an economist, from that perspective, you see people begging, I've been in foreign countries, seen them beg. Could there be a good and happy beggar?
Is there a virtuous poverty? Yeah, that would be another way of saying it. Can you be happy and be poor?
I mean, the beggar is happy in what he does, and he's receiving money, and he may use that to support his family. Is he, and he's happy in what he does? Is he good?
Well, you can be happy. If you're happy, you're good.
I mean, but
if you're good, you're happy. So no,
Or can he be good?
Yeah, I mean, is that enough? Well, hopefully, extremely poor people and beggars can be happy and can be holy. That's not an argument for why. That means we should still help out the beggar and the poor. In fact, often, as Jesus makes us aware, it's the poor who are blessed. At the same time that you're not supposed to step over Lazarus on your front door. You better take care of him. Hopefully he's happy. He can be happy, and you should still be taking care of him.
But can he be good?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Actually, Mother Teresa would be the best witness to this, where she had situations where she would give some rice to a poor family. And someone came to her later and said, you know, that poor family took that rice and they gave it to another poor family. And said, so don't you think we should take some rice to that family that just gave the rice away? And Mother Teresa said, I wouldn't take away the charity that they've given. I think the poor can be. In general, if you look at charitable statistics, if you look at how much people give away relative to their income, the very wealthy give away a fair amount, but we're not talking tithing, we're not talking 10%, we're talking like 4% on average, because a lot of you don't give anything away. The poor are even more generous than that in terms of their income. They put us to shame. And it's us in the middle who have the lowest charity rates. Of course, not every individual's, hopefully, individuals are much more generous than that. But as a group, the poor put us all to shame. And they're poor. Thank you.